What's going on, guys? Bladezilla here, and today I've got a real cool one from Shirogorov and Tom Mayo. So this is a collaboration, and this is their Dr. Death. This guy was offered in 3 varieties, one being full tie, one being kind of a black carbon on the top, and then the third, in no order, it was a Arctic, I think it was Alutex kind of carbon. Pretty cool knife. This one I think is the most desirable of the entire series because it is full tie and weighs very little, which is amazing. So we're going to talk about this knife today and go over all kinds of little details. Just as a reminder, this is a coffee stop style conversation with the knife, and I'm not going into every little detail, but I'm going to just talk about it. You know, we'll find out a few things as we kind of go, and kind of go from there as well. Check out my website, guys, Bladezilla.ca. We're in Canada. Everything here is available and ready to go, and yeah, you don't have to worry about getting it over the border. We do obviously ship down to the US. It's a lot easier to do than getting knives up to Canada, but you know, for my Canadian aficionados of the Shirogorov world, we've got your back. So anyway, well, what is this knife? What isn't this knife? And why is it so darn cool? Well, I think I need to zoom out a little bit. What do you think? Barely fits on the screen. Well, so Tom Mayo obviously has had the Dr. Death for quite a while, and done a number of variations and varieties on this guy. And Shirogorov, they do these collaborations, and this is, I don't know the exact age of this collaboration, but it's not new. So a super collab of this particular knife. I believe they made 100. So this guy, it should say on the inside, and I can grab my little light here, but I think this one was number 7, or at least that's what the box said. Yeah. So there you go on the inside here. I am terrible at showing this stuff, but normally on the inside you'd get like multi-row bearings written there. Here we're just getting number 7. That's kind of cool. I don't know if you can see that or not, but 007, or actually no double O's, just 7. Now what is also so cool about this is it actually runs on their roller bearings. Now some of the collabs, they run on obviously multi-row bearings. Their custom division knives kind of all run on, or majority of them run on, roller bearings, and this guy is on rollers, which is cool. I should say this as well, like, because it's an earlier collab, I don't know exactly the year, but in my head, geez, I thought it was like 2018? That sound about right? Feel free to flame me if I'm wrong and let me know in the comments, but these were pre-COA, so they didn't do certificate of authenticity on these. They just kind of stuck with the box. So these guys all come with just the box and the cloth, and then it was later that they started doing COAs. So pretty cool in that regard. It is all micro milled, or as they call it, 3D milling, right? You get some curvature to it, which is fantastic. This particular one, no wear on the clip, which is awesome. No wear on any of the pivots, any of the hardware. It's very rare to find one like this. And as we get older and older and more years between the models, they start to become harder to find in mint condition. So being that this guy doesn't have a COA, and I'm actually not exactly sure, I thought in the back of my head just from previous experience, I thought this was an S90V blade, and I don't know where that would be written on here. Am I blind? Well, it's probably not written on here if I can't see it, but I'm pretty sure it's S90V. That would make sense for the kind of that kind of timeline. So I'm going to go with that, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But it is obviously 3D milled. You kind of get these really cool edges on the holes here. You can see that. It's not just a flat drilled standard hole like if we look at my neon. We can see how this guy is just flat drilled. There's no curvature to it, right? That's a Walter Randolph, I believe. Is that right? Walter Randolph Blade Works mod to this. And they just drill the holes. So it's pretty cool when you get the level of detail on the Tom Mayos. They're known for these, right? The speed holes or whatever you want to call them. Homer Simpson, that's where that reference comes from. If you've ever watched The Simpsons, he's talking with Ned Flanders and he's putting speed holes in the hood of his car. I always thought that was pretty goofy. But the level of details on this is through the roof. So the fit and finish, it reminds me a lot of the Russian Overkill RJ Martin, which I have somewhere here. And that it's micro milled. You can kind of see the surface. Sorry about the fingerprints on this one, but very very fine detail, and it's smooth, but it's not meant to be, right? Like it's super smooth, but there's texture there, which is awesome. The flipper tab, if we look at this guy as well, a couple things, right? So I always mention this. If you look at where the tab pulls, right, comparative to the pivot center, you're going to talk about kind of the leverage ratio on this. And when you have more leverage, that pivot comes forward in front of it, and it'll snap out a lot quicker. When that pivot, when that flipper tab is behind the pivot, it's like going into a bigger gear on your bicycle. So it's easier to flip it out, but it doesn't shoot out as quick. So some people, they hold this the wrong way, and they go, oh, it's got such a weak detent or whatever, or such a strong detent. It's like, no, it's just the leverage. Like, you can fail this when you flip it. So a normal effort level would be kind of like that, maybe a little less. You can kind of just see it's light, right? There. So you can fail it. And that's just because of the ergonomics, but if you kind of move your hand back on the knife, or just give it a little more gas, it comes out no problem. And that's the Tom Mayo design. That's not a Shirogorov thing. That's the Tom Mayo design on these. If we look at the pocket clip, once again, we've got some of these cool kind of holes that are going on, right? Which is a nice touch because you can actually see in and see the blade right through the front of them. But I don't know if you can here as well. Yeah, can you? Does that go right into the knife? I think it does, which is cool. So that'll go through the frame, through the pocket clip, and see the blade. That's a nice touch. That's a cool feature. Even on the back, these three. The pocket clip design is a little different than a standard Shiro, and as you can kind of see, it should be pretty obvious. Like, if we compare this to a standard one, it's kind of got the initial little bump. It's open, which is nice, so you can get it over your jeans easily, and then the holding portion of it that will lock over top of the seam on your jean pocket, which is really cool. Man, there's a lot of detail on this. I never really noticed. Man, that's so cool. We've got the we've kind of got the quote custom division bit, I guess, on the lock bar as well. That's not normally there. That's normally like a little Torx bit. So that's kind of cool. They're doing that. So you're kind of getting three sizes of that bit here, of the Shirogorov bit. One, the small, two back here on the handle, and then three on the main pivot. You're getting all three on this. That's cool. You don't normally see that. We've got a tiny little backspacer, which, you know what? It makes sense because the blade is actually quite thick and the handle's quite thin. So when you get a small little backspacer, I imagine if they would have put that further up, it would have become an issue because I can look down here and see that the blade is actually very close to the top of this, so there's probably not a whole lot of room here to put in more fill, which is fine. Now, the inside of this is where this knife is just incredible, okay? My perception on the Dr. Death model, without holding one prior to this, was they look big, they look long. Like you look at this and you go, that's a very long knife. Okay, and with that, I thought, okay, it looks long. It must be like a 4-inch blade, right? It must be 4.5 inch, 4.25. Like, it looked to me like more of a 111 size knife. And I couldn't be any further from the truth here because the handle is actually quite thin. So it's not as tall as a lot of the other Shirogorovs. And that's one of the first things you notice, okay? in your hand, it's a thin knife. Good ergos. You've got the nice little spot here for your finger to kind of fall in on. The jimping's excellent. You've got a nice grind down the top, on the top of the blade, where you can kind of choke up if you want to, with your finger for the finer slicing. That's not a problem. That won't be a problem. It's cool. It's a lot lighter, and I don't want to use the word dainty, but it's a lot lighter and finer than I was expecting the knife to be. And I'm going to get a weight on this, because I may as well, with my fancy scale that's got all kinds of stuff on it. Let's zero it out. Any guesses? I'm going to say 3.5 ounces. It's got to be in that conversation. 97 grams, so light, very light. 3.5, oh my god, 3.4, 3.5, 3.4. It's kind of fluctuating a little bit. Let's just zero it one more time. 3.4 on this scale, so plus or minus like 8.5 pounds. I'm just kidding, but yeah, 3.4 is extremely lightweight. It's lighter than a lot of my custom division knives, so there's a ton of milling on the inside of this that I'm not going to open this one up. I want to leave the hardware mint, even though this particular one I can tell needs some oil, which would speed that up a little bit, but I'm not going to bother with that. I want to keep it mint. Yeah, I would love to open this up and look at all that milling work inside, because it's just ridiculous. And I'm gonna attempt to show this, like I always attempt to, so it's gonna be terrible. But hopefully you can look on the inside of this and see all that work. Isn't that nuts? There's so much material missing on the inside of this thing, but from the outside you'd never know. Unbelievable. And something that I really love about this as well is when you have the knife in hand and the holes are all lining right up and you see right through the knife like that. That's such a cool feature. Front and back, right? It's just a nice touch. Right? Even the one that you don't see through, it kind of goes down and actually goes into the clip. Kind of is cool, right? So I guess if you truly wanted to take the clip off and see through, be my guest, but I don't really recommend that. That'd be kind of silly. Light, very, very light lockup, as is customary, right? You're in, 15% or less. Very smooth. You have an over travel stop as well, which doubles as your, I guess you should say, the lock bar insert doubles as your over travel stop, which is pretty standard. But anyway, beyond that, we just have a super, super cool knife. For example, I love the Tom Mayo logo here with the Shirogorov bear. And I love how it's etched actually onto the frame itself versus the blade. You know, a lot of these knives, they tend to kind of put, a logo or something here, right? And when that's on the blade, it's in the cutting path. I'm not a real big fan of that. And I've always mentioned, I really, really like when they brand the frame. It's just such a better way to go about things, in my opinion. So I love that they're doing that. If we kind of move our way back to the Backspacer, a couple things stand out here that are pretty cool on the flip side. One, the Backspacer doubles as a centering exaggeration device, technical term, but it also, I believe, if I remember correctly, it's meant to be a glass breaker. So I think I've got, I don't have any with me this second that have a glass breaker on it. I might have a Benchmade bailout near me that has a glass breaker on it, but essentially it's just a fine tip point that you can hold in your hands like this in the event of some kind of an emergency where you can use it to smack in a glass. And that's actually very unique. And let's be honest, a lot of the knives we talk about, they have sharp points that could probably do the job in a pinch. But the fact that it's built into the Backspacer Just looks so cool. We also have that lanyard hole. So if you want to run some paracord or some leather, I think a leather would look really cool on this actually, just given that it's a lighter knife in the first place. So it wouldn't bog down the total carry weight. It would look cool with that. So from the side, you know what, you've got holes going through this entire frickin' knife. And, you know, there are going to be people that complain about the Backspacer. Oh, I can see through it. And it's like, well, you can see through the whole knife. So is it really that big of a deal? I always reference this with the Stellar. And I didn't even do a comparison. What am I doing here today? So the Stellar that I have here, you can see through it, right? And that's how they get around putting some rope through there, or some string, or some leather for beads, etc. And that's a bit of an eyesore for some people. I don't mind it at all personally. I think it's very fitting with the design. But if you look at how they're doing their other knives, like here's a Custom Division Turtle. You know, they have been building them into the Backspacer, right? So from the top, you've got an accessible port to run your string through, but from the side, it still looks nice and full. So I think that's a cool way of going about things. I really don't mind that. And also when you take that off of the frame, if you damage this, you're not going to be damaging a whole titanium scale on the knife. So I think that's kind of cool. Now, because I have completely omitted size comparisons, and I usually do this at the very start of a video, I'm filming this one at a bit of a weird time normally, so I'm kind of all over the place. Let's do some size comparisons and some measurements. So let's get that party started like we normally do, because it just looks so much longer. I'm looking at it on the screen right now, and it looks way longer than it is. So 8 5/8 right to the tip, maybe even less, maybe 8 1/2. Is that right? Kind of 8 1/2 to the tip, 8 5/8 to the end of that glass breaker, or glack breaker apparently from earlier. Blade length, it's less than 4 because it's 4 to the flipper tab, so it's 3 5/8 sharpened, I'd say. Does that look right to you guys? 3 5/8, 3 3/4 sharpened maybe, but it's shorter than normal. And it's got a long handle though, so 4 5/8 on the handle, almost 4 3/4. There we go. And in terms of comparisons, let's bring this down. Now we're going to walk down some knives. So let's do first and foremost. Because I've got them here, I just threw some Bio Lights and Darks onto the site today. Not these ones, but another pair we're trying out. So there's your Bio Sergey Bio Dark. And you can kind of see, like, it's not any really different in size. It's just thinner. And when I put them like this is what I'm trying to show, is the size comparison. Okay? I will grab that amazing turtle. Favorite knife of all time. There's your turtle, okay? Which it makes it look huge. Alright? Okay? So there we go. The turtle is a bigger knife. We'll do the Stellar. Okay? Are you seeing the difference here? Like, are you seeing how thin this knife is and pokey and stabby it is? Let's get this one out. There's your Stellar. Let's grab my neon that I just had. Actually, you know what? Let's do the Custom Division neon. Just grab this one, which is awesome. Been looking for a Custom Division neon forever, and I don't know if I've had this one in any videos yet. So there's a size comparison, but I'd really like to show it just with the neon, because everybody knows the neon size, and I think that's more representative. So it's going to look tiny, the neon, compared to it on this side of the camera. Okay, and then on this side, it's going to look similar. Isn't that crazy? Just the angle of the dangle. Because the camera is, the way the light hits the, if I hang a camera right above these knives, I'll have no light. So I'd say this is actually, this angle right here is probably pretty comparison of how the actual sizes are. It's not a huge knife, okay? The frame itself is very similar to a Neon, a little bit bigger, but certainly well smaller than an F95, okay? Like, you can see it there. Like that, I think, is a pretty fair comparison between the three. But when you look at it, you just think it's so huge, so long. That's what she said. I gotta seriously stop having coffee. So aside from that ridiculous humor that I seem to have on the Sunday morning at the wee hours, we've got a terrific knife. So we've got obviously the Tom Mayo Shiro barrel looks awesome. We've got the signature holes on the frames, which is just done so well. And the closer you get, the more detail you can see on those. You've got this titanium backspacer, which I think, if I'm looking at it, I'd say it's kind of a, well, you've got two different, you've kind of got a polish on the side, and kind of like a working finish, or a bit of a, what do you call that? It's got a certain, it's like a stone wash on the top, but it's polished on the side. That's unique for a backspacer. That's cool. It's a nice detail. It's a very unique detail. But that pocket clip, what is so cool is just the fact that you see the blade through it. That's so cool. Now, another little detail here that I'm just noticing now. So what do you guys notice on this that's different than a lot of the other Shirogorovs? And I actually just had a cup of coffee and I did a quick search on this knife, and it's a 2016. So I said 2018 earlier. So it's from, I think, Blade Show or something. They had a few of these up for grabs, but it's an older knife, right? So 7 years old at this point when I'm filming this. I'm filming this kind of in the fall 2023. And yeah, so it's an older knife, which is why that would make sense. The COAs didn't start, I think, till 2018. I think. I say these things and I seem to be always incorrect. And it's like, well, actually, you know, it was the Q2 of whatever. So that's pretty cool. So the lock bar, back on track here. So what are we seeing on that lock bar? Well, if we grab that Russian Overkill, that'd be a good comparison here, actually. What's different between these two on the lock bar? I'll give you a hint. Look at where the machining is on the lock bar. Okay? This is a bit of an older style. So when you cut out the groove, right, it's just a bit of a, I would say it can kind of be cool, it can kind of not be cool. It makes the knife look thinner when you kind of put the cutout in the lock bar like that, okay? Now something that they've done on this knife, which is in line with that kind of timeline, is the lock bar is actually, the groove is on the inside. See that little hole there? So versus it being on top, it is now on the inside. And I don't know if I have any other knives in my collection off the top of my head that are that way. I think they're all, the oldest CD, the Stellar is obviously not on that. I think a lot of the lock bars are all internal now, which is funny to me. Yeah, the bios. What about that old F95? Ah, there we go. I have an old F95. There you go. So, old F95, this is an old custom division. I've done a video on this one, but same thing. That groove in the lock bar is bada bing, bada boom, internal. Which is cool. It's a nice little touch. Because it just kind of makes it look so clean and silky smooth, as Billy Madison says when referring to his hair in the tub. I don't know what the hell I'm doing today with these jokes. They're not even funny. But to me they are, and that's what counts, right? So you've got that groove on the inside. You've got some cool milling lines, actually. I would love to know the purpose of that, on why they do that, or if they're tooling lines. But they do stop, which is cool. Now, in terms of fit in hand, I've talked about this earlier. You got this nice little bump, right? It kind of fits nicely. I don't mind that. I could see how someone would say, oh, I'd wish it was a little further out, considering how big the knife is. Don't have an issue with it. Now, remember, it is a Tom Mayo design, so you do get to remember the roll. I like to do the roll test, I guess you could call it, on the lock bar and see how it's sticking up. So a couple things, you've got a nice little groove cut in. That's unique. That's a Tom Mayo thing. So your finger just slides right onto that lock bar, even easier than I would have expected. That's a real cool little finish there. But not only that, it actually sticks up, right? So I always show this on some of my Shiros. But anytime you have a lock bar that's elevated, see how this is a quantum. See how when you roll this, you can see how it sticks up. It just allows your finger to find it so much easier. Same with on the turtle. And this one's like, I probably should have used this one first. See how it sticks right up? Okay, parallel, right? And then I roll it and you see it just poke out. That's, to me, like one of my favorite features that Shiro does. And obviously Tom Mayo has added to that with a little indent, and I didn't even notice that until you go find the lock bar and you go, oh man, it just feels like I'm just hitting lock bar so easy. Which is nice because when the frame is as thin as this, it kind of adds a little depth to it, right? Like if it's super, super thin, like on, oh boy, what one would be the thinnest here? Well, it doesn't matter. But when it's super thin, it almost feels like a bit of a wall. And then to add to the fact that that is elevated and in front of the frame, now they've rolled in a little bevel. It's super comfortable. And when you connect them nicely like this, you know, the angles match up, it fits so well. Just so smooth for your finger. It's so natural. That's the word I'm looking for. Very natural. Very natural. You know, it has some beauty on this knife that, you know, it's just, you don't find it in a lot of them anymore. You know, you look at the blade, we've got some polished flats, cool finish to it. Lots of fingerprints, as is normal. Which I should probably just get off while I'm trying to focus on the blade itself. But I just don't think ahead 5 seconds. Yeah, so you got some cool, different finish on it. You've got a nice swage in the top here. Very shallow belly to it as well. Just an overall cool knife. Now one thing, even on the very tip here, I don't know if you're going to see this, if the camera's going to want to think. Even the tip of this has a little bit of a kick out in it to add some strength to the tip of that blade. That's cool, it's a nice detail. They obviously exaggerate this in a lot of the newer models, but that's a nice detail on an older model. And I don't know what it is, but I love seeing, I'll grab that old F95. I love seeing when they, on that lock bar, when they use that bit. I just think that looks so cool. And it's so unique. Because you don't see that. It's a silly little detail, but to me, I really, really dig it. I really dig that. Because even on the new F95, that it's internal, right? So we're on like a production model. I don't even have, do I have a regular turtle? No, it's gone. Let's grab the white hattie. I've got one of those left. There you go. Even on the white hattie, you can see it right there. That's a Torx bit. That's crazy. I just love the look of that. It's so silly. It's so silly, but the detail that I just love. And I love the fact that they center it and they exaggerate that a little bit. And remember, they're hand ground, so that distance around there might, depending on if it wants to focus, that distance around there is going to change for every knife. I've seen a lot of the production pieces I have, they come in and they're all just a little bit different on the grind versus the Quantum Ursus or any, like the Ursus line, they're all machine ground. So any of the high-end production stuff, it's all done via hand grinds. And this one's no different. It's all hand ground. So it's just so cool to kind of see those details. The action, if like this particular one, the action feels, I guess, a little slow, but let's be honest, it's a 7-year-old knife with hardware that hasn't been touched. It's going to happen, Do you want to open it up? I don't know. I don't see myself using this knife ever, because at this point it's so highly collectible. I just don't want to mar up any hardware and open it and speed it up. It's exaggerated, obviously, by the flipper tab location, which we talked about earlier. And that is what it is. I don't mind it. Like, you get used to the speed and it's not even a problem. So, it's really not a big deal. But man, I had a few people reach out on this, and they actually mentioned, they're like, I didn't even know they made a full tie Dr. Death. I always see the black tie and sometimes an Arctic tie. A black carbon and an Arctic carbon. I sometimes see them, but I never knew they made a full tie. And you go, yeah, they did. They made it. And the problem is no one wants to sell them because it's the most desirable one. So that's why you don't see them ever. Super, super cool. I love that. Like, I think my favorite part of this knife, two things. One, you look through, you see the blade. I love that. And because of the neon I have, I just think that's so cool to see. If it's just on the counter or next to your keys or whatever, I love being able to see that blade. And two, through the clip, you see the blade. That's the coolest feature to me. You're now going through two materials and the blade. Like, that's just so cool. Am I crazy? Like, I just think that's such a cool little thing. Obviously, the fit and finish is at a custom division level. It's done very, very well. It's just a beautiful blade. Absolutely stunning, actually. Well, I think that's going to wrap this up. I think I've talked about everything. I've done the measurements, compared it, done the ergos, talked about the S90V blade, talked about the finish on the blade, which is stunning. The holes. Talked about the amazing etching in, I don't know how they do that, but you get a Tom Mayo and a Shiro. Talked about that. The lock bar insert and over travel stop built in, the cool pivot. Hardware, that mat goes small, medium, large on the tooling, right? Big, medium, small. The reverse lock bar, which is pretty rare nowadays, it seems. And then that cool glass breaker, or glack breaker, as I said originally. So I think that might be it on this one. Hopefully I didn't go too over time on this, but sometimes you get a knife that you just want to see more of and talk more about, and when I put it under a camera here for half an hour and I look at it, sometimes these little details pop out that you just never even noticed or maybe just didn't care to pay attention to. Because, like, I'm looking at this and it almost looks like a blade, like, it almost looks like an OTF, kind of old school blade that should just stick right out of this thing with a dual flared top here. Like, it's just these little details you don't really notice until you just stare at it for half an hour and talk about it. I really enjoy this stuff. I really do. Okay, guys. Well, thanks for stopping by and taking a look at this, and appreciate you as always. Any questions, leave them below. If there's many errors I made, which I assume is more than 80% of what I said, please comment on that below as well, because it'd be nice to let other people know that it's from whatever year and whatever blade angle and blah, blah, blah. All right, guys. Appreciate you stopping by. Have yourselves a good week. Peace.